Hi everybody, my name is Hannah, this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a tutorial to share with you today. We're going to be mixing some watercolor paints with this new paint tray. I have my Stockmar watercolor paints. I've only ever had 3 to 6 of the colors, but today I've got 20 out of the 22 colors that they carry. So these come in concentrated form. You do need to dilute them with water. Here's a look at some of the colors that we're going to be mixing today, including black and white. This is the paint palette that I have. You can find details about this one in the description box below. It comes with 22 wells for your watercolor paints as well as 6 larger mixing wells. So I'm trying to decide how I want to arrange the colors, and I do want it in color rainbow order. I'm not sure where to place black and white in this mix or the 2 browns. Here's what the mauve looks like. This was my tester just to see how much I needed to mix of the concentrated paint with water. That first pass was a little bit light, so I add more. I'm going to mix it up and realize that it is way too dark, but I'd rather it be a little bit darker versus lighter because we can always water it down as we're painting. So I've watered it down a little bit more and you can see that it's still very intense, but for this purpose, I think that intensity is a little bit better than going too light with your watercolors. Next, we're moving on to red violet. I'm just going to put a drop of each of these concentrates into each of the wells. I'm going to dilute it with water and mix it well. I find that in some cases, the paint is really intense and in other cases, it's kind of light. So you just have to play around with it until you get a mixture that works for you and your projects. Now I got a little bit of paint splatter into one of the other wells and I'm trying to clean it up. Once it dries, you do need to moisten your paper towel in order to get it clean again. It's going to get really dirty, but we'll be able to see that at the end. After mixing 3 colors, I needed to take a break, and after a couple of days, I saw that all of the water had evaporated from each of the wells, and this was just perfect. This is what I was hoping would happen. Now we're going to continue adding more paint into each of these wells, but adding a few drops of water to the ones that had already evaporated, rehydrated those paints very easily. Now I'm working on the golden yellow, and I decided to start this with a very light yellow and a white, and then move through the rainbow colors that way. However, in retrospect, I wish I had started with the browns because I feel like the browns work a little bit better with the yellows than where I ended up placing them at the very end after green. We're going to do lemon yellow, and what I noticed with the yellows and the oranges is that they had a more intense color even though I was using the same amount of concentrate to water proportion. I found that the yellow, the golden yellow, and the oranges were really intense in color versus the blues and the purples were a little bit lighter with the same proportion. It's time to mix the white. It was a lot thicker than the other colors, and it took a little bit to dilute it. This is a color that we are really enjoying using. It is opaque, whereas the other colors are translucent. However, if you are getting the Stockmar pan paints, they are semi-opaque. I really like working with the white. You can see that it sort of changes that golden yellow into like a creamsicle color. Now we're going to move on to the blue, and again I'm using the same proportion, but you're going to see that this color ends up being a lot lighter than the more intense yellows and oranges. So I'm going to test this one out and realize that I probably want it a little bit darker. Going with more intense colors allows you to have a little bit more versatility once you start painting because it's very easy to lighten the color, but you're not going to get a more intense color otherwise. So I went ahead and I added another drop, and I'm still not super satisfied with how intense the color is. I still think it's kind of light. This is what it looks like when we are completely done adding all of the colors to each of the wells. There are 2 greens that I added by mixing a blue and a yellow together so that I could have a little bit more variety with my greens, and then there are the browns at the very end. I ended up putting black in between purple, plum, and blue, but it actually isn't a great place for it because it's really hard to tell which one is black versus indigo. I love the way they look. It is fabulous, and this is what it looks like when they all evaporate. It is super easy to rehydrate them, and you can just use your paintbrush paintbrush that's a little bit moist in order to draw some color up. It makes it very easy for portability. You're not going to spill any of those once they dry up. And I'm finding that we're enjoying using this paint palette so much. It allows us to use all of the colors of the Stockmar paints in a very easy way. We can easily rehydrate them once they dry up. We don't need to mix several paints and worry about having them grow mold if they don't get used up right away. But I do want to say that this is great for middle school students. This isn't a way that you would present paints and use them for wet on wet watercoloring with the younger students. So this works out really great for about 5th grade and up. And we've been enjoying using this for a lot of our projects. It's really great to have out and not worry about it spilling because they dry up very easily. I hope that you enjoyed this look at how we mixed our Stockmar watercolor paints. If you'd like to see some of the other tutorials in this series, you can check the description box below for a link to the playlist. You can also check out the blog post that accompanies this video. You can also find that link in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.